Episode 9 wraps up with explosions, absurd comedy, and a commercial, but beneath all the chaos is a pointed message about privilege, parenting, and personal responsibility. The episode satirizes every generation of the Smith family, showing that the children aren't the only ones behaving immaturely. The episode begins by exposing the biggest unintended consequence of Rick's lifestyle. Morty and Summer have become exactly like Rick. Instead of accepting responsibility for getting expelled, they simply use futuristic gadgets to silence adults, cheat the system, and avoid consequences. Rick initially makes things even worse by altering the school's records so their problems magically disappear. Even Morty calls him out. For perhaps the first time in a while, Morty correctly points out that Rick isn't teaching them anything. Every time they make a mistake, Rick simply uses technology to erase it. That's why Rick sends them to the off-world disciplinary camp. Ironically, it's probably one of the few genuine parenting decisions Rick has made in a long time. Of course, because this is Rick and Morty, even the rehabilitation camp turns out to be a complete disaster. At first glance, the camp looks like paradise. The teenagers have unlimited money, no supervision, endless parties, alcohol, violence, expensive toys, and complete freedom. But the illusion quickly falls apart. Nobody is allowed to leave, children are encouraged to indulge every impulse without limits, anyone who wants responsibility or a normal life is mocked as lame. The camp becomes a satire of unchecked privilege. These kids have been given anything except boundaries. Without adults willing to say no, they eventually create a society that's just as oppressive as the one they rebelled against. Ironically, the campers become prisoners of the very lifestyle they celebrate. Their freedom turns into another form of control. Throughout most of the episode, Morty and Summer believe they're smarter than everyone else. They think ordinary rules don't apply to them because they have Rick's inventions. That illusion disappears once the kidnappers attack. For the first time, Rick can't immediately rescue them. Instead of waiting for another Deus Ex Machina, Summer realizes they have to solve the problem themselves. It's one of the episode's biggest character moments. Rather than acting like spoiled children, the siblings organize the campers into a coordinated defense and successfully reclaim the camp. The lesson Rick hoped they would learn doesn't come from the camp itself, it comes from being forced to act without Rick. While Morty and Summer are away, Beth and Jerry immediately regress into teenagers. Instead of enjoying a peaceful house, they raid Summer's room, experiment with alien drugs, hallucinate across the galaxy, nearly kill their limousine driver, and eventually become just as helpless as their children. Their storyline mirrors Morty and Summer's almost perfectly. The children behave like irresponsible adults, the adults behave like irresponsible children. The episode blurs the line between generations, everyone is immature, everyone makes terrible decisions, and everyone eventually needs someone else to save them. Normally, Rick is the solution to every problem. Here, he's just as intoxicated as Beth and Jerry. He can barely open portals, he rambles about food, he accidentally stumbles through gunfire and defeats enemies almost entirely by chance. It's one of the episode's funniest jokes, but it also reinforces its central point. Rick isn't the omnipotent genius his family usually depends on. When he's unavailable or simply incapable, the rest of the family has to rely on themselves. Ironically, Rick's inability to help becomes exactly what Morty and Summer needed. The campers did change. When the kidnappers demand ransom, they discover most of the wealthy parents don't even bother answering. Some intentionally abandon their children. That realization forces the campers to confront a painful truth. For all their money, freedom, and arrogance, many of them were simply neglected kids acting out because nobody cared enough to parent them. Afterwards, they stopped thinking only about parties and began working together. It's not a complete transformation, but it's the first genuine act of responsibility they've shown in years. By the time Space Beth arrives, every member of the family has embarrassed themselves. Morty and Summer abused Rick's technology until they lost all perspective. Beth and Jerry behaved like reckless teenagers, and Rick enabled everyone before becoming too intoxicated to help anyone. Nobody gets to claim moral superiority. Rather than blaming one generation, the episode suggests the Smith family's dysfunction is shared. The children learned entitlement from Rick. Rick learned emotional avoidance long ago. Beth inherited many of Rick's flaws. Jerry continues chasing escapism whenever life becomes difficult. Everyone contributes to the chaos. The mid-credits scene continues one of Season 9's strangest running jokes. Jerry is back at work, pitching a new mascot called Cool Horse, a deliberately ridiculous advertising character designed to market addictive products by appealing to whatever trends kids currently find irresistible. The over-the-top presentation pokes fun at modern branding, where companies often rely on flashy mascots and viral marketing instead of the products themselves. But the commercial pitch is only half the joke. As Jerry is presenting, he notices Rick standing nearby in his gardener outfit, silently staring at him with an unsettling grin. Earlier, Rick had threatened that one day he would turn Jerry into a carrot, and the mid-credits scene reveals he has absolutely no intention of letting Jerry forget it. Rather than actually carrying out the threat, Rick seems to be getting genuine entertainment out of psychologically tormenting his son-in-law, leaving Jerry terrified of what Rick might eventually do. It's a perfect example of Rick's warped sense of humor. Even after the family has survived another chaotic adventure, he can't resist reminding Jerry that living with the smartest man in the universe also means living under the constant possibility of some completely absurd scientific punishment. The episode isn't really about defeating kidnappers or surviving a chaotic space camp. It's about what happens when nobody ever grows up. Rick spent years solving every problem with technology instead of teaching responsibility, and the results are obvious in Morty and Summer's behavior. At the same time, Beth and Jerry prove adulthood doesn't automatically bring maturity, as they spiral into an equally ridiculous adventure the moment they're left unsupervised. By the end, Morty and Summer take their first real step toward independence. Because Rick isn't there to save them, Beth and Jerry are forced to confront how childish they can still be, while Rick remains the one character who seems almost completely oblivious to the episode's lesson, ending the adventure thinking more about getting Del Taco than reflecting on everything that happened. Like many of the series' best episodes, the story ends with only modest personal growth. No one is completely transformed, but each generation briefly sees its own flaws. The Smiths fly home slightly more self-aware than before, even if they'll almost certainly repeat the cycle the next time Rick opens a portal.